Hello everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm very nervous. I'm not a natural public speaker, so I'm not going to pretend to be remotely professional. I've got my cue cards and my hands are shaking. So I'm going to be talking to you today about all things diets, body image and exercise. So yes, as Sophie said, I'm a personal trainer. I've got a little studio in Truro. And when you walk into my studio, my priority is that you feel at ease, that you feel comfortable, that you feel safe. And I'm not interested when you come into the studio or to anybody what your body looks like. So I passionately believe that what your body looks like is the least interesting thing about you. I haven't always worked that way. So because of my own experiences as I grew up, I had an eating disorder. And when I first qualified as a PT, when about 8 or 9 years ago now, I was still recovering from that eating disorder. And I very passionately believed, I haven't even gone to my next slide, you know. There we go. So yeah, I very passionately believed that a person's health was determined by their body size. And I thought that if all my clients ate like me and exercised like me, they too would be thin and therefore what I deemed to be healthy, which I was, of course, very wrong about. So where am I up to? Yeah, see, I knew this would be the problem with cue cards. I'd just lose where I'm at, so I'll have to get rid of them eventually. So yeah, I believed that, that was the way forward. But when I look back, in reality now, I know that what I was doing back then wasn't healthy. I was not a picture of health. I had a very restrictive diet. I had a very obsessive relationship with exercise. And I think as I started working more with my clients, I realised that there was so many more things that were important than what you were eating and what kind of exercise you're doing. That health is just this huge thing that goes far beyond that. And I started to notice with my clients that they might be hitting goals like getting the first full press up or running a 5K. And instead of celebrating that with me, they were caught up on what the number on the scales was saying. And I realised that I was part of that problem, that I was perpetuating that. And so I wanted to be a part of the solution. So that's where A Body to Live For was born. So I'm by no means, I don't do things perfectly. I still make plenty of mistakes in my job with personal training. I'm always learning, but it's a lot more of a fun way to work than how I used to. So, do any of you, I know that you might not want to share, but if we could have maybe a show of hands, has anybody ever felt pressured to change what the body looks like? Yeah, so most of us in the room, I think there. And would anybody feel comfortable to share where you feel that those pressures come from? Go for it.
So everyone used to say I had puppy fat when I was a kid.
Okay.
I was larger as a child. So I have diagnosed body dysmorphia.
Yeah.
I know I'm a size 8, but if I look in the mirror, I think I'm the biggest person in the room.
Yeah.
So and that's always stuck with me because when I was a
From
kid,
family.
every family member used to call me fat, and they'd go, "No, it's just puppy fat."
Yeah.
And that's so ingrained in me.
Yeah.
It's never left.
Yeah, totally get that. Anybody else? Any other places that the pressures come from? Yeah, go ahead.
Pretty similar story. I was quite loved as a child, and same with the family, but I was also quite badly bullied in school.
Yeah.
And then that led to an eating disorder, which I still have.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, I think these pressures, obviously we've talked a lot about social media. Social media is a huge one. But also, just day-to-day life, just everywhere. We're just, bombarded with this message that we need to look a certain way, that being thin is superior. So I was thinking about the conversations I have with clients. A lot of them, it's conversations they have with a doctor, which is what scares me. It's from medical professionals that are putting such pressure on people to fit into that certain BMI category without looking at what their, general health looks like at all. From colleagues, I used to work in an office environment and it was so toxic with, I got so caught up in it, people doing these like juice diets, shake diets, and selling them, you know, in the office environment. And you felt pressured that if you were having, you know, heaven forbid, a sandwich at lunch and not a liquid lunch, that, you know, you were wrong, that you were bad. And I must remember to change slides. I'll just stay on the same one the whole time. And has anybody ever been on a diet? Yeah. So again, most people in the room. Anybody willing to tell me what diet they've been on and any more about it? No, I don't blame you. I'll only slag it off. So yes, there is so many examples, and I think that they change so much, don't they, with trends and again with social media, all that kind of thing. So for me, I was just always, you know, eating as little as possible, just restricting as much as I could. But then over the years, I remember the whole clean eating thing. I think when I first went on Instagram, so many different toxic diets. And has anybody, what would you say about when you've been on a diet? Would you say it's worked long term? Is anybody sat here that, you know, feels that it was really successful and they, you know, can be positive about it? I'm not going to, you know, be horrible if you say that. I totally get that, you know, in some cases it can be a positive experience, but the majority of the time, so there's a statistic that should be the slide before this one, that says 95% of dieters will actually fail at their diet within 1 to 5 years. So even if in that initial, you know, first few months you really notice that you feel great, that you know, getting loads of compliments, up to 5 years down the line it might not be so successful. And we often, so it's a little bit off at the top there. Oh, don't worry, it doesn't matter. But have I messed it up?
No, you haven't. Oh, I don't want to change the page.
Ah, there we go, there we go. Perfect, thank you. So if you've been on a diet, you might recognise this cycle. So this is actually taken from a book called Just Eat It by Laura Thomas, which I would recommend. I've got loads of book recommendations, so I can email those afterwards. So we start off with this desire to lose weight. So this is where the cycle starts. And it might be from some of those influences that we've talked about, like doctors, friends, family, viewing an image on social media, and you think, right, I'm going to do it. And as the cycle goes round, so in that mindset, I think that you kind of really get into, you know, you start to feel inspired by it. You might fill your cupboards with low-calorie foods. You might join a gym. And so the cycle starts. You're starting to restrict your calorie intake. You might be getting up and, you know, doing some really intense exercise, getting into a bit of a routine. And you feel driven by those initial results. So at first you feel amazing. You might start to feel like your clothes are getting a bit looser. People start to give you compliments and it feels great. And you think, oh, why have I never done this before? This is so easy. But then the cravings kick in. So we'll go into a little bit more detail in a minute about why those cravings kick in and what happens in your body, what your body's trying to do to get you to eat. But food, if you've been on a diet, you'll be able to relate to this. Food is just suddenly like, you know, irresistible. And even things that you might not have enjoyed in the first place, you know, you might not usually like, you suddenly start to get cravings for them. And it starts to get a lot tougher. Your body is really starting to work against you. You know, getting up for that morning run might feel a bit tougher. You might be feeling really lethargic, a bit more sluggish, and it all starts to slow down. And so eventually the blowout happens. So for 95% of those dieters, at some point or another, you have that blowout and you think, right, sod it, I'm going to order that Domino's, I'm going for it. And you probably eat more than you would do if it was just a normal meal. So if you weren't dieting. So we have that blowout and it's very often followed by feelings of guilt and shame. So I can really relate to that. I used to do a lot of binge eating and I'd hide food, I'd have these huge blowouts, perhaps try and get rid of it afterwards. And that's where the feelings of guilt and shame might come in, even if it's obviously, you know, not as intense as that. And eventually the weight goes back on until we go back to the start of that cycle, and it goes round and round again. So I feel like I've probably been around that circle hundreds of times. Can you relate to that cycle a little bit? Does that, make sense? And it's just not easy, you know, that cycle exists because dieting is so hard and it makes us so miserable. So as I said before, 95, technical difficulty. Sorry, Sue, I've messed this up more than anyone else did, haven't I?
No,
There we
it's
go.
fine.
So 95% of dieters will regain the weight they lose within 1 to 5 years. What should I actually press?
On that arrow.
Okay, right, so I should leave it there.
Clicking on that arrow, but on the left-hand side.
Okay, thank you. So 95% of dieters will regain the weight they lose within 1 to 5 years. And I think the really interesting statistic here is that 2/3 of those dieters will actually regain more weight than they lost in the first place. So again, that's a mechanism that your body kicks in to try and protect you. So why doesn't it work? So a bit sciencey, lots of words I can't spell, but I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on in your body and why dieting feels so impossible. So there's something called the set point weight theory. So the theory goes that we all have a natural weight, so where your body naturally settles. So you might gain weight, you might lose weight, but your body will always find its way back to that point. So for example, you know, we might relate to if you've had the flu or something like that, you can't eat for a couple of days and you put your jeans on and you think, oh wow, I've lost about half a stone, you know. And then a few weeks later, you've put it back on. Your body's found its way back to where it's supposed to be. And so it's your biological blueprint. Everybody has a set point weight and we're all totally different with where it's at. So when your weight drops beyond or below this set point, your body tries to regain control through physiological and biological changes. So we've got something in our brains called the hypothalamus. I hope I've said that right. And it's like your body's thermostat. So for example, it controls your body temperature, your hunger hormones and where your hunger levels are at, and lots of other things in your body. So it's keeping it's keeping everything happy, keeping everything working as it should do. So when your weight starts to drop below that certain point, just like if you were to get cold and your body makes you shiver or it makes you, go to get a jumper and put the heating on, not that we can afford that anymore. We grab a jumper, don't we? It's your body's way of trying to find its way back to where it's supposed to be. So you're shivering to warm up. And just like when your body drops below its set point, it brings in these changes that will help it to get back to where it wants to be. So if it gets a little bit lower, you might find that your appetite increases, the things that we said before, food suddenly becomes irresistible. You've got that urge to just binge and have a blowout. You have less energy, so your body's starting to slow down to conserve energy, and a slowed metabolism as well. And then so just a little bit more about how that all works, what's going on inside your body. So the first thing that I always find is really fascinating is about the glycogen. Because a lot of people, when they go on a diet, they say, I'm sure you've heard it or you've seen it yourself, you weigh yourself after a few days and you think, I've lost half a stone, I'm doing so well. So that's often where your body is depleting its glycogen stores. So glycogen is stored in the liver and in the muscles, and it's a source of energy. So glycogen, it's like a carbohydrate. So it's a really fast burning source of energy that your body can access. And that glycogen, for every 1 gram of it that you've got in your body, it actually holds on to 3 grams of water. So, you've probably heard of the term water weight. So as that glycogen depletes, your body will just naturally shed, quite a quick amount of weight quite quickly on the scales. Muscle proteins start to break down for energy. So your body wants to hold on to its fat stores. It thinks that it doesn't understand that you're on a diet. It thinks that you're starving yourself. So it'll try to protect its fat and it'll break down muscle proteins instead. And in turn, your metabolism slows down. So everything gets quite sluggish. And your hormones, hormones are released to try and increase your desire to eat. So to really drive you to eat. So again, those things that you might not usually feel like eating suddenly become really irresistible. And cortisol is released, causing stress and agitation. So perhaps you can relate to that feeling of hangriness, when you're restricting what you eat. It just feels horrible, doesn't it? So that's what's going on in your body when you go on a crash diet. So, oh, for God's sake, sorry, Sophie. Left side. So how does it make you feel when a diet fails? Would anyone be willing to share?
Miserable.
Yeah, miserable.
Hungry.
Yeah, hungry. Those hormones. So some of the things that I thought you might think about were feeling guilty, shameful. So if you're looking at those images on social media of somebody with that, what you think is that perfect body, you might be thinking, oh God, why haven't I got the willpower to do it? Why can't I look like that? And you feel ashamed of yourself, feel like you're not good enough, feels that you might be unhealthy, worthless and frustrated. So yeah, there's some of the things that I've definitely felt over the years. So, it's a little bit wonky, isn't it? So how are we going to heal our relationship with these different areas? So your body, food, and exercise. So this is the harder bit. This is where, it's a bit more of a challenge because like we said, you've got everything around you, everything in society is telling you that you need to conform to this perfect body ideal. So we're going to start with your body first of all. And I thought for the workshops this afternoon, you don't have to, but if you wanted to perhaps share one of these positive steps that you might take going forward, would be nice to have a little chat about if you felt that you wanted to. So aiming for body neutrality. So I know that I will never look in the mirror and love my body. Body positivity for me is unattainable. I'll never be there. However, I have realised that there's so many more interesting things to life than what my body looks like. So when I get up in the morning and I look in the mirror and I might not like what I see, I no longer engage in those dieting behaviours. So I'm at that point where I've found peace, I'm accepting it as it is, and I'm no longer wasting my time and energy hating it or trying to change it and going around that miserable cycle again and again. Setting boundaries. So this is one that, I talk about with clients quite often. If you've got people in your life that are making you feel pressured to go on a diet or are making you feel, wanting to talk about your body, what your body looks like, making comments. I feel like we've all got that family member who wants to, say something about your body when they first see you. Set boundaries with them and tell them that you don't want them to talk about you like that anymore, or that you don't want to engage in diet talk anymore. I think it's really, especially with women as well, it's something in common, isn't it? It's something we can, we've all raised our hands in the room, haven't we? It's something we can all relate to. And it can sometimes feel like the easiest thing to say when you see somebody and say, I used to do it all the time. I was the worst for it. Say, oh, wow, look at you, you've lost weight. And it often seems to be the first thing that we go to sort of bond over and talk about. But you've got so much more interesting things to talk about than what your bodies look like. And try to view your body as an instrument, not an ornament. So think about all the wonderful things that your body can do instead of what it looks like. And again, it's bloody hard, but we can try and work towards it. And so when it comes to food, so I'm very conscious that I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a dietitian, I'm not qualified to talk to you about diet today, even though I just have loads of time. But in talking about what to do going forward, these are the place that I would start if you were, wanting to dabble and looking at that area, improving your relationship with food. These books have been really useful to me, and I actually have them out in the studio for clients to borrow and have a read of, because they've been really helpful to me. So something that I try and encourage with my clients is eating intuitively. Has anybody heard of intuitive eating? Do you know what it is? You have heard of it, yeah. So it's just really going back to where we were at. If you think of a toddler who has absolutely no idea about dieting, they don't know any of these food rules that we've learned. But going back to, how you were as a kid, where you just eat when you're hungry, you eat what you want. You don't think, oh, it's after 7 o'clock, I'm not allowed to eat a carb. You just listen to your body and try and tune into your natural instincts and what your body is trying to tell you. And sometimes we get it wrong. And that doesn't matter. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that you need to restrict the next day. So these are a really good place to start. And I know some of you have took a picture of that. I can send you an email with the recommendations on and point you in the direction. I've also got a YouTube video that a nutritionist did on intuitive eating for my clients. And I'm sure she'd be more than happy for me to share that with you guys. It's just a private YouTube link if anyone was interested. So exercise. So this is the area that I'm passionate about and that I am qualified to talk about. So we're going to talk a little bit more about exercise. So this is one of my favourite quotes, and I actually had it on the studio wall at one point. In order to rediscover the joy of movement, we must stop asking ourselves if our exercise counts. So often when I do a consultation with clients, I'll say to them, what kind of exercise do you do on a day-to-day basis? And a lot of them will say, I do nothing. I do absolutely nothing. I'm so lazy. And then they'll proceed to tell me how they walk the kids to school every day. They love gardening. They go and play football in the park with the kids at the weekend. And they don't count these things as exercise because we've perhaps, again, been conditioned to believe that exercise needs to be punishing and painful and sweaty for it to work, for it to be effective and burn those calories or whatever we feel that it needs to do. These are some examples of exercise that I certainly, when I started getting into the fitness industry, I thought these kinds of things were the only valid forms of exercise that counted. And I would have really discounted doing anything like this side of things. I really can't dance. We'll just keep that discounted still. But I wouldn't have done any of these things, thinking that it was having any benefit to me. Only really done them because I'd have to. I was the person that drove 5 minutes to the gym to get out the car and go and run on a treadmill because I thought the walk there was a waste of time. Can any of you relate to that? Would you also feel that way? Is there any other kinds of exercise that you enjoy that maybe don't fall into that category that anybody would want to share? Great! I did consider putting that on there, so I'm glad you said it. Absolutely. And it could be, it could come to either side really, depending on what kind of mood you're in. Yes, lovely example. And I wanted to talk to you about something called hope molecules. So this doesn't really lead on very well from that conversation, but I just had to get it in here somewhere to tell you about the hope molecules. So I find it really frustrating as somebody who I have over the years struggled with anxiety and depression. I've recently learned that I have obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. And in my darkest days, if somebody had told me to get out of bed and go on a walk, so it'll make me feel better, I would have been felt very frustrated. And I've definitely had that conversation with doctors a lot of the time that, you need to make sure you're getting out, you're doing this. And I think if you've struggled with a mental illness or a mental health problem, that sometimes, just getting out of bed and getting into the shower can feel like you've run a marathon. So I'm not here today to tell you that exercise is the answer to mental illness or mental health problems. I think it's a really great tool when you're at a good place where you can use it. But I appreciate that not everyone's at that place. So hope molecules. I read about this in a really interesting book called The Joy of Movement by a lady called Kelly McConaughey. And again, I'll share the details of that book with you if you'd like. So this was a study that was done about the benefits of exercise. So when your muscles contract, so this is quite a new discovery because obviously we've heard of like serotonin, endorphins, those kinds of things that we get from exercise, but this was a new one that I'd not heard of. So when your muscles contract, so when you're doing any kind of exercise, your muscles secrete a protein called myokines, and these have been nicknamed hope molecules because they travel to our brain and act as a natural antidepressant. So this is any kind of exercise. So this is even if you're confined to a chair and you're doing bicep curls, any muscular contraction, and obviously the more intense it is, the more we release. But any kind of muscular contraction, your body will release these hope molecules. So they act as an antidepressant. They make us more motivated. They help us to learn from experience. They can kill cancer cells, and they make us more resilient to stress and trauma. And when I read about that, I just felt like it really resonated with me, because I think at the times when I have found it too hard to exercise, when I do feel ready, I feel like exercise gives me a bit of hope again, and it makes me realise that, you know, better times might be ahead. And the way Kelly wrote about this in her book as well was lovely. She said that every time you exercise, you're giving yourself, or every time you move your body, you're giving yourself an intravenous dose of hope, which I thought was really lovely. So I wanted to share that with you. So how do we find enjoyment through exercise? So joyful movement. So these are some of the positive steps that I've taken and that I thought you guys might consider as well. So thinking beyond burning calories. So when we looked at those columns before, the things that we think are the most effective, you know, the things that we were told are the fat burning, the calorie burning, thinking past those and set goals that are personal and meaningful to you. So for example, lifting a heavy weight, or running a longer distance, you know, maybe in a quicker time. If you're not a runner, it might just be walking. It doesn't have to be, you know, anything really out there. So with my clients, when they come into the studio, we don't weigh them, we don't measure them. There's no before and after photos. They all have a spreadsheet that shows their progress. And that's in terms of what weights they're lifting. So we track their squats, their deadlifts, all of those lovely things. And with some clients, you know, newer to it and that aren't as mobile, it might be as simple as, you know, being able to squat down to a chair and get back up again. So they're the ways that we track progress that have absolutely nothing to do with the body size, what they look like, burning calories, and it's so much more fun and rewarding when we can celebrate that instead of being distracted by those numbers on a scale. Embracing that lower intensity exercise. So there was actually a study done by Stanford which showed that walking in nature produces the same neurological change as I knew I wouldn't be able to remember this, as two of the most promising experimental treatments for depression. So again, I'm not saying it's the answer to everything, you know, getting out and exercise. You have to be getting out in nature to exercise. You have to be in the right headspace to do that. But one of those experimental treatments that they're currently using is IV infusions of ketamine. So it shows just how powerful being out in nature and walking actually is. Joining a class or exercising with a friend. So it is the most daunting thing to walk into a gym on your own. I still feel like that, you know, going into a new place. So going with a friend, somebody that you trust and feel confident with, can feel really good. And going to a class as well, synchronized movement has actually been shown to alter our neurochemistry and allow us to experience ourselves as connected to something bigger than us. So that's another fact that I've got out of the lovely book I mentioned by Kelly. She talks a lot about how synchronized movement, working out to music in classes, can actually have a really positive impact on our brains and helps us feel good. And so to take the pressure off. So find what works for you. It doesn't matter if you're following a TikToker or an Instagrammer who is lifting weights and, you know, doing heavy things in the gym. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to do the same thing. There might be something that you out there that you enjoy that's more suited to you. For me, you know, I go in and out of training in the gym. I don't always enjoy it. Sometimes annoys me, you know, being around lots of people, and I'll just dip in and out and do other things that I enjoy along with it. So again, Kelly, I'm Kelly's biggest fan. She doesn't know this, but this is an extract from her book, and it's one of the last paragraphs, and it made me cry when I read this for the first time because I thought it was so lovely. And this is another one to get on the studio wall at some point, I reckon. So I'll read this to you. There's no training formula you have to follow. There is no one path or prescription except to follow your own joy. If you're looking for a guideline, it's this. Move any kind, any amount, and any way that makes you happy. Move whatever part of your body still moves with gratitude. Move by yourself and in community. Move in your home. Move outdoors. Move to music or in silence. Set goals that are personally meaningful. Take baby steps, then conquer a big stretch. Seek out new experiences and explore new identities. Pay attention to how activities make you feel and how they change you. Listen to your body. Give yourself permission to do what feels good. Revel in metaphor and meaning. Look for places, people and communities that inspire you and make you feel welcomed. Keep following the thread of joy as long as you can. Thank you, everyone. I won't touch that. I'll let you do it.